Jaime Lannister enters a Game of Thrones cloaked in a reputation that he believes he fully understands. Yet his first great error lies in how he interprets his own identity. He assumes that being labeled the Kingslayer defines him completely, and rather than challenging or reshaping that perception, he leans into it with cynicism. This becomes a self-fulfilling trap. By embracing the role others assign him, he limits his own capacity for growth and moral clarity, convincing himself that honor is a hollow concept rather than something he might reclaim. His dismissal of honor as a meaningful ideal is another fundamental mistake. Jaime sees the rigid codes of knighthood as hypocritical, largely because of his own experience killing the Mad King. However, instead of distinguishing between flawed individuals and the ideals themselves, he rejects the entire system. This oversimplification blinds him to the fact that honor can exist in imperfect forms, and that his own actions could contribute to redefining it rather than abandoning it altogether. Jaime is also wrong in how he evaluates the moral weight of his past decisions. While he internally justifies killing the Mad King as a necessary act to save countless lives, he fails to recognize that secrecy surrounding his motives contributes to his dishonor. By refusing to explain himself, he allows others to construct a narrative that diminishes him, and he passively accepts it. His silence is not noble restraint, but a strategic miscalculation that costs him agency over his own story. Another misjudgment lies in his belief that cynicism protects him from vulnerability. Jaime assumes that by mocking ideals and detaching emotionally, he can avoid being hurt or judged. In reality, this attitude isolates him and deepens the very misunderstandings he resents. His wit and arrogance become shields that prevent meaningful connection, reinforcing his reputation rather than challenging it. His interactions with other knights further reveal his flawed perspective. Jaime often views them as either naive or corrupt, leaving no room for nuance. This binary thinking leads him to underestimate individuals who genuinely strive for honor, and it prevents him from seeing potential allies or sources of inspiration. His inability to recognize sincerity in others mirrors his refusal to acknowledge it within himself. Jaime is wrong, too, in his assumption that reputation is immutable. He behaves as though the world has already judged him beyond redemption, and therefore sees little reason to act differently. This fatalistic mindset becomes an excuse for continued moral ambiguity. By believing change is impossible, he ensures that he never truly attempts it. His pride plays a crucial role in reinforcing these errors. Jaime equates admitting fault or seeking redemption with weakness, which keeps him locked in a cycle of defensive arrogance. He fails to see that true strength might lie in confronting his past openly and striving to act differently moving forward. Instead, his pride maintains a stagnant version of himself. Another layer of his misjudgment involves his perception of loyalty. Jaime conflates loyalty with personal attachment rather than ethical responsibility. This leads him to justify actions that serve those he loves, regardless of broader consequences. He does not yet grasp that loyalty without moral consideration can become complicity. His worldview is also shaped by a misunderstanding of justice. Jaime tends to see justice as either rigid and hypocritical or entirely meaningless, leaving no space for a balanced perspective. This prevents him from recognizing moments where justice and compassion might align, further reinforcing his disillusionment. Ultimately, Jaime's greatest error in this area is his failure to imagine himself as something more than what he has been labeled. His identity becomes static because he refuses to engage with the possibility of transformation. This internal limitation sets the stage for his arc, but in a Game of Thrones, it stands as a defining misjudgment that shapes all his actions. Jaime Lannister's confidence in his own abilities often leads him to underestimate the complexity of the political landscape around him. One of his key errors is assuming that strength and reputation alone are sufficient to maintain control. He fails to account for the subtle, often invisible forces at play in the realm, including alliances, grudges, and the ambitions of others who operate beyond the battlefield. His confrontation with Ned Stark illustrates this miscalculation clearly. Jaime treats the situation as a personal grievance rather than a delicate political matter, allowing emotion to override strategy. By attacking Ned in the streets, he escalates tensions unnecessarily and contributes to the destabilization of King's Landing, showing a lack of foresight regarding the broader consequences. Jaime is also wrong in how he assesses risk. He frequently acts as though his status as a Lannister and a skilled warrior shields him from repercussions. This belief leads him into reckless situations where he relies on immediate dominance rather than long-term planning. His actions reveal a pattern of short-term thinking that undermines his position. Another mistake lies in his dependence on his martial prowess as a solution to all problems. Jaime assumes that conflicts can ultimately be resolved through force or intimidation, neglecting the importance of diplomacy and subtlety. This narrow approach limits his effectiveness in a world where power often lies in negotiation and perception rather than combat. Emotionally, Jaime misjudges the impact of his relationship with Cersei. He believes their bond is unassailable and justifies extreme actions in its defense. However, he fails to consider how this attachment compromises his judgment and exposes vulnerabilities. His inability to separate personal desire from political reality weakens his strategic position. Jaime also underestimates his enemies, particularly those who do not conform to traditional notions of strength. He dismisses individuals who rely on intellect, patience, or unconventional tactics, failing to recognize that these qualities can be just as dangerous as physical skill. This blind spot leaves him unprepared for challenges that cannot be met with a sword. His arrogance extends to his interactions with allies as well. Jaime often assumes that loyalty can be commanded rather than earned, overlooking the importance of trust and mutual respect. This attitude creates distance between him and those who might otherwise support him, weakening his network of influence. Another critical error is his inability to anticipate the consequences of symbolic actions. Jaime does not fully grasp how his behavior is perceived by the public and the nobility. Each impulsive act reinforces a narrative that others can exploit, yet he continues to act as though perception is secondary to intent. He is also wrong in believing that control can be maintained through dominance alone. Jaime overlooks the fragility of power structures, especially in a volatile environment like Westeros. His reliance on intimidation ignores the fact that fear can breed resistance as easily as obedience, creating instability rather than security. In the end, Jaime's strategic and emotional miscalculations stem from a deeper overconfidence in his own instincts. He trusts his immediate judgment without sufficient reflection, assuming that his experience and skill are sufficient guides. This overconfidence becomes his greatest weakness, leading him into situations where his assumptions fail and the consequences ripple far beyond his control. Beyond these patterns, Jaime also misjudges the long-term consequences of the culture of fear that surrounds House Lannister. While he benefits from the intimidation associated with his family name, he fails to recognize how deeply this fear breeds resentment and quiet opposition. Instead of securing loyalty, it often creates enemies who wait patiently for moments of weakness. Jaime underestimates how dangerous suppressed hostility can become when given the right opportunity to surface. He is further mistaken in assuming that personal loyalty from a select few can compensate for widespread distrust. Jaime places great confidence in the bonds he shares with certain individuals, believing these relationships will stabilize his position regardless of broader opinion. However, he overlooks the reality that power in Westeros depends on collective perception as much as personal allegiance. By neglecting the importance of public and political trust, he weakens the foundation on which his influence stands. Finally, Jaime fails to grasp how quickly circumstances can shift beyond his control. He operates as though the present balance of power is relatively stable, not fully appreciating how fragile and reactive the political environment truly is. This lack of adaptability leaves him vulnerable when events begin to spiral, as he is often caught responding rather than anticipating. His inability to think several moves ahead reinforces the pattern of miscalculation that defines much of his role in the early stages of the story.